I never thought a simple apartment sublet would turn into a week long experiment in human survival, embarrassment, and what I can only describe as an alien's misguided attempt at breeding. But there I was, standing frozen in my own living room, my hands half raised in a gesture I'm fairly sure looked either defensive or desperately polite, while my new roommate, an actual, bona fide alien, hovered 3 inches above the ground, her translucent skin shimmering faintly in shades of teal and violet, her 4 eyes blinking asynchronously as though processing too many things at once. And yes, she was looking at me like I was the only solution to some galactic puzzle I didn't know I was part of. Before I dive into this interstellar disaster, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you're going to want to hear every awkward, horrifying, and unintentionally hilarious second of this story. I promise you, no human being could ever invent anything remotely this strange, and yet somehow, here I am. Her name, as far as I could decipher from the barely coherent translation module she carried like a backpack, was Relvash, though she insisted I call her Ryle, because it made human pronunciation easier. She was small but muscular, built like a gymnast crossed with something entirely unclassifiable, her limbs bending in ways that were biologically illegal for humans and horrifyingly impressive for anyone else. And then there were the appendages, thin, whip-like antennae that quivered whenever she was curious, skeptical, or, as I later found out, mildly impatient. Right now, they were quivering in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable. It all started because I'd thought I was just renting an apartment in a slightly experimental neighborhood. You know, the kind where the landlords advertise culturally diverse tenants and new experiences, which in hindsight was clearly code for you might share your home with a literal alien life form. Ryle had arrived the previous night, quiet and polite at first, offering a perfunctory wave and hovering in the corner while I unpacked. She seemed harmless enough. An alien roommate seemed like a novelty I could manage. And then the rituals began. At first, it was subtle. She studied me as if I were a puzzle missing pieces, asking questions like, do humans require pairing? Or, how do you exhibit compatibility? I laughed nervously, thinking she meant dating, or perhaps roommate compatibility. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The more she studied, the more convinced she became that I had failed some unspoken cosmic test of human vitality. And somehow this was all my responsibility. I remember sitting on the couch, half watching a terrible sci-fi movie ironically titled Galactic Love and Human Error, when she appeared beside me, her shadow stretching impossibly across the room. I am ready to attempt human reproduction, she said, her voice melodic but absolutely devoid of humor. I choked on my popcorn, nearly coughing it out onto the carpet, because no one ever says that casually. Excuse me, I asked, hoping this was a joke. It wasn't. She tilted her head, one eye narrowing, the other 3 blinking with impatient precision. For scientific purposes, she clarified, and to establish interspecies compatibility. You are essential. Essential. She wasn't threatening, not exactly, but the kind of calm insistence she had made it clear there was no room for negotiation. My entire body went into what I can only describe as defensive panic mode. The sort of desperate flailing that makes your brain scream, "This is not normal! This is illegal in at least 3 countries!" The apartment itself seemed to contract around us, the narrow living room suddenly feeling like a lab chamber designed specifically for awkward encounters. I could feel my pulse in my temples, and I was suddenly hyper, aware of the faint hum of the refrigerator, the 2 bright lamp overhead, and the smell of slightly burnt popcorn on my fingers. Every micro detail screamed at me that this was no longer just a room, it was an arena, and I was the main act in a performance I hadn't auditioned for. And yet, she didn't just hover there silently. No, she began a series of movements I later realized were part of her mating ritual, tiny deliberate steps that made my brain insist they were absurdly intimate for someone I barely knew. She circled me slowly, her antennae brushing against my shoulder as if testing the air for human chemicals. My stomach twisted into knots, half from panic, half from the absurdity, because the more I tried to mentally categorize this behavior, the less human it seemed. And that only made me more panicked, more aware, and significantly more sweaty. Her eyes, those 4 alien orbs, locked onto mine, and I could almost feel the thought process spinning in multiple directions at once. Do you understand the parameters of this ritual? Are you capable? Will the specimen cooperate? I gulped. How could I explain that the only thing I was capable of at that exact moment was not losing consciousness? And then came the first micro-cliffhanger, a subtle, terrifying pause where she simply floated just inches above my couch. "Begin," she said, and I swear I heard the air itself tense around us. I wanted to protest, to explain, to throw popcorn at her, but my mouth refused to cooperate. Somehow, my body became a hostage to the situation, an unwilling participant in a scenario so absurd that even my brain started questioning reality. And that, my friends, is exactly when the doorbell rang. I froze. Ryle froze. The pizza delivery guy froze outside, blissfully unaware of the cosmic-level panic happening inside apartment 3B. I could hear his footsteps, his oblivious humming, and for a moment, I considered sprinting for the door like a human with an emergency in their own house. But the longer I waited, the longer Ryle seemed to assess the situation, her 4 eyes scanning the room like a quad-lens camera calculating probabilities. The tension was exquisite, agonizing and absurd all at once. I was certain that if I made any sudden movement, I would either start an interstellar war or ruin my own reputation as a competent human male. Every second stretched like taffy, every shadow seemed to hold judgment, and I realized, right at the precise moment the pizza guy knocked again, that there was no turning back. This was it. My alien roommate was about to attempt human breeding, for science, in my living room, and the pizza guy was about to witness the beginning of an encounter that no Yelp review could ever prepare him for. The first real challenge came not from Ryle's ritual itself, but from the simple act of trying to maintain human composure. My body betrayed me immediately, palms sweating, knees wobbling, and my voice registering as a strangled squeak instead of anything remotely articulate. Meanwhile, Ryle hovered, observing, analyzing, her antennae twitching as if reacting to the stress patterns she could sense in my blood, or maybe in my aura, I wasn't sure. All I knew was that every instinct screamed run, and yet, somehow, my feet refused. "Sit!" she commanded, her voice calm but authoritative, a melodic insistence that somehow made me comply even as every rational part of my brain shouted, "Do not comply!" I lowered myself onto the couch, careful to leave as much physical distance as humanly possible, though in retrospect, that distance seemed laughably inadequate in the context of her floating presence. Ryle tilted her head again, one eye scanning me like a live diagnostic. "Your behavior is inefficient," she noted, as though disappointment could be delivered via a single vowel sound. I swallowed hard. "I'm efficient by human standards," I said, though my voice cracked halfway through. She blinked slowly, considering. "Human standards are unpredictable. I must adapt." Adapt. That word haunted me, because I had no idea what adapting entailed. She began moving closer, slowly, deliberately, the air around her quivering faintly with some energy I couldn't identify. My stomach tightened, the room felt smaller, my lungs tighter. My mind ran through every possible social strategy: apologize, deflect, negotiate, pretend this is a dream, but none of them seemed remotely effective. Then she reached out. Her hand, or what I assumed functioned as one, hovered a few inches from my arm, and I swear I felt a subtle vibration, a pulse, as though the air itself was communicating with me. "Do you consent?" she asked, though in her language the word was something more precise, more binding. My mind scrambled for the right human response. "Yes." "No." "Bought call 911, I said, weakly. "I think so." Her 4 eyes blinked in unison. A rare gesture I later learned was a sign of curiosity mixed with mild amusement in her species. She floated closer still, now so near that I could see the tiny, iridescent veins under her translucent skin, the way her muscles moved under what looked like liquid crystal, the faint shimmer of bioluminescence that pulsed with her heartbeat, or whatever passed for a heartbeat in her body. My own heartbeat raced, not entirely from fear. As she positioned herself beside me, I became hyper-aware of the smell of her, like ozone and mint, something not unpleasant but intoxicatingly alien. I tried to focus on normal human thoughts, Netflix, my work, grocery lists, but they kept evaporating under the weight of what was happening. Every micro-movement she made sent a shiver of tension through me, a slow burn anxiety wrapped in bewildered curiosity. Then came the ritual gestures themselves. She began a series of motions subtle, alien, and incredibly invasive by human standards. My mind attempted to catalogue them scientifically, but my body responded instinctively, flinching, tensing, and occasionally relaxing all at once. Each micro-movement of hers felt like a question I had no answer to. Every twitch of her antenna, every tilt of her head, every blink of her 4 eyes was a small cliffhanger, a prompt for me to react correctly or suffer social or, I assumed, interstellar consequences. I tried conversation as a defense mechanism. "So, how long does this usually take?" I asked, desperately hoping that small talk could anchor me. She paused. One eye narrowed, the others fluttering. "Duration is variable. It depends on specimen responsiveness." I swallowed, realizing that in her eyes, I was not just a human. She measured me, evaluated me, and judged me for qualities I didn't even know existed. At this point, the absurdity reached peak levels. My human mind began noticing things it normally ignored, the way her light shimmered against the walls, the faint hum of her breathing, the pattern of her pulses. I became aware of the tactile sensation of the couch beneath me, the texture of the carpet under my fingertips, and the constant, low-level panic brewing in my chest. And yet, despite everything, there was something thrilling, impossibly human, in the sheer ridiculousness of the situation. Micro-cliffhanger, she paused mid-motion, hovering over me, and asked, "Are you ready to proceed?" My pulse spiked. I realized that despite the terror, the humiliation, and the panic, a tiny, deeply human part of me, curiosity, maybe pride, maybe sheer stubbornness, wanted to see what happened next. By the time I realized how completely trapped I was in this ritual, the room had transformed in my mind into something that was neither living room nor lab, but a strange nexus of human and alien expectations. Every shadow cast by the flickering light of the kitchen lamp seemed exaggerated. Every movement she made larger, slower, somehow more deliberate. I was painfully aware of my own heartbeat, each thump echoing like a drum roll announcing my impending fate. Ryle hovered mere inches away, her teal and violet skin glistening faintly as the ambient light caught it. Her 4 eyes scanned me with a kind of analytical patience that only made my panic worse. It wasn't anger or threat in those eyes. It was something far more unsettling, curiosity, and the cold, precise expectation that I would somehow respond correctly to whatever she intended. My entire body tensed instinctively because I had no idea what correctly looked like in her culture. "You must relax," she instructed, her voice gentle yet firm. "Specimen tension is counterproductive." I tried. I really did. I inhaled, exhaled, attempted to center myself like a yoga class on fast forward through my brain. But the closer she moved, the more impossible it became. My palms sweated, my muscles refused to obey my thoughts, and every instinct in my body screamed, "Do not comply, run." She extended a limb toward me, delicate and precise, brushing a fingertip along the side of my shoulder. There was a strange warmth to it, not human warmth, more like a gentle electrical hum, and I shivered. I didn't know whether to be afraid or impressed. The sensation alone was enough to make me hyper, aware of every inch of myself. I realized I was holding my breath, gripping the couch cushions so tightly I feared I might leave impressions in the fabric. Then came the first real test of her human breeding experiment. She gestured me into what I thought was a ridiculous pose, mimicking what her sensors had suggested was a human-compatible stance. "Stand," she said. My legs protested, wobbling as if they had minds of their own. I half stumbled, my hands flailing slightly as she moved to steady me. Her touch was firm but surprisingly gentle, and I felt the tiniest spark of connection, an odd intimacy I had no right to feel. As she positioned herself beside me, I noticed the subtle play of light across her body, the way her skin seemed to pulse in response to my own anxious energy. I realized I could hear my own heartbeat over the quiet hum of the apartment, the popcorn still half eaten on the counter, the faint whir of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock on the wall. But none of that mattered. Everything shrank to the tiny, tense space between us, a bubble where normal rules no longer applied. She began a series of intricate movements, gestures, subtle shifts in posture, tiny pulses of bioluminescence that she seemed to emit intentionally. My brain tried to process them scientifically, but my body responded instinctively. I flinched when she moved too quickly, then relaxed when she mirrored my hesitation. It was a dance I didn't know the steps to, and yet somehow she guided me through it, the tiniest smirk flickering across her translucent lips. "I don't understand all of this," I admitted, my voice catching. My words seemed comically inadequate in the face of interstellar science. But she didn't judge. Instead, she tilted her head, one eye narrowing as if evaluating my honesty. "Understanding is unnecessary. Response is sufficient." And just like that, the rules of engagement became clear. I had no idea what I was doing, and that was fine. My human awkwardness, my panic, my fumbling, it was all data. At one point, she hovered so close that I could feel her warmth, or whatever analog of warmth her body emitted, against my own skin. My thoughts spiraled. Is this normal? Is this dangerous? Is this sexy? Why am I thinking that? My internal monologue became a frantic, contradictory mess of terror and fascination. And then, just as I reached peak panic, she paused, antenna quivering, four eyes blinking in unison. Micro cliffhanger, she asked, "Are you willing?" The word willing, in that context, was terrifyingly vague. Willing to what? Willing to comply with her alien rituals. Willing to engage in some interspecies bonding I barely understood. My pulse raced, sweat trickled down my spine, and I swallowed nervously. "I think so," I said again, the human hedging instinct kicking in. She smiled, or something approximating a smile in her physiology. "Good. Response sufficient." And then the ritual accelerated. She moved with surprising speed, guiding me through motions that were at once alien and bizarrely intimate. My entire nervous system was on high alert. I could feel every small gesture in my own body, my hands, my knees, my shoulders responding reflexively. My mind scrambled for humor to cope, telling myself, "Okay, this is absurd. You are a grown man, and you are being analyzed by a literal alien." But laughter refused to emerge. It got caught somewhere between fear and awe. The apartment felt smaller, tighter, the walls pressing in as if aware of the tension in the air. Every sound, the faint buzz of the light, the distant siren from the street, the soft thrum of her energy, seemed magnified. My brain whispered that this was a high-stakes moment, but my body responded with a bizarre, human mix of anxiety and fascination. I was trapped, yes, but also oddly engaged. A participant in something I couldn't fully comprehend. And then came the moment that would forever haunt me. She leaned forward slightly, her antenna brushing the side of my head in a gesture that was part examination, part connection. I froze, my entire body screaming both "don't move" and "do not resist." I could feel the pulse of her bioluminescence in the air between us, an alien rhythm that made my heartbeat stutter in response. "Micro cliffhanger," she whispered, or emitted a sound interpreted as whisper. "Now, interact. Interact." My mind blanked. My hands twitched, my knees trembled, and yet somehow I moved, fumbling through motions that made perfect sense to no one except her. She responded, adjusting, guiding, almost coaching me in a way that was equal parts nurturing and exasperating. Every misstep was corrected gently, every hesitation mirrored patiently. My humiliation reached new heights, but beneath it, a strange relief, maybe even a tiny thrill, pulsed. Time itself seemed to dilate. Minutes stretched, each action lingering longer than it should, each gesture weighted with absurd significance. I realized I was sweating more than I had in years, that my stomach churned, that my thoughts were chaotic. And yet my mind clung desperately to the smallest threads of control, follow her movements, respond to her guidance, survive this cosmic experiment without collapsing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ritual reached a peak. She hovered in front of me, antennae twitching, bioluminescence pulsing rhythmically. "Completion imminent," she announced. I had no idea what that meant, but it sounded serious. My brain screamed, "Brace yourself," while my body obeyed instinctively. Micro cliffhanger, she extended a final gesture toward me, one that seemed both symbolic and intensely intimate, and paused, waiting for my reaction. After the peak, everything slowed. The tension that had gripped the apartment for hours, or maybe seconds, I couldn't tell, began to dissipate. Ryle floated back slightly, her four eyes blinking in unison. antenna quivering with what I interpreted as satisfaction. I sagged onto the couch, muscles trembling, heart racing. My mind ran through the events, trying desperately to catalogue them without admitting to myself how completely mortifying and thrilling the experience had been. "Specimen response acceptable," she announced, her voice calm and melodic. I blinked at her. "Acceptable?" I asked, voice weak and ragged, as if the air itself had been stolen from me. She inclined her head. Yes. Human cooperation was sufficient. Parameters met. My body slumped further, part relief, part disbelief. Somehow I had survived the ritual without catastrophic embarrassment, and yet I felt every microsecond etched into memory like a personal scar. I noticed then how small the room felt now, how normal yet alien everything seemed. The popcorn on the counter, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the slant of sunlight through the window, they were the same as before, yet charged with new meaning. I realized I had spent hours, maybe minutes, I wasn't sure, under the intense scrutiny of an alien who had evaluated every tiny human response I had to offer. And I had passed, somehow, on the merit of sheer awkwardness. Ryle moved to a corner, hovering briefly, antenna twitching. Experiment concluded. Data satisfactory. She sounded almost pleased, which was terrifying, because if I had known alien pleasure could be so intimidating, I might have reconsidered. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my mind a jumble of relief, confusion, and lingering adrenaline. "So we're done," I croaked. She nodded once sharply, then drifted closer again, almost casually. "And what now?" I asked, my voice low, unsure if it was safe to move yet. She tilted her head, 4 eyes assessing me. "Now normal cohabitation resumes, though behavior will continue to be monitored." My stomach sank. Normal cohabitation, monitored. That sounded like I had just been recruited for some alien research program I hadn't signed up for. My entire body tensed again. "Monitor," I repeated, hoping it was a joke. She blinked slowly, deliberately. "Yes, for ongoing data integrity." I exhaled slowly, realizing that this was the point where human coping mechanisms had to kick in. Humor. Yes, humor could save me. Right. Data integrity. Makes sense. Totally scientific, I muttered, more to myself than to her. She tilted her head slightly, antenna quivering. I could swear she understood my attempt at humor, though I had no way to gauge if it was amusement, tolerance, or mild irritation. Time passed in an odd liminal state. We both adjusted to post-ritual cohabitation, a fragile truce of sorts. I went back to my chair, pretending to resume normal life, though every muscle still held tension, every thought circling the absurdity of what had just occurred. She observed me intermittently, occasionally floating near, her eyes evaluating my every gesture. I realized then that, for the rest of my lease, nothing would ever feel truly normal again. Every glance, every casual movement, was loaded with tiny judgments that I didn't fully understand. And yet, there was a strange relief, a sense of accomplishment, as if surviving the ritual had granted me some odd, unearned respect. I felt more human somehow, though not in a way I could articulate. I had navigated something incomprehensible, survived it, and, in a way, bonded with a being from another world. A ridiculous, awkward, terrifying, and strangely intimate bond. Finally, she drifted toward the kitchen, antenna quivering in what I interpreted as casual interest, and began humming softly, a sound vaguely musical, vaguely mechanical, and vaguely comforting. I leaned back, exhaling fully for the first time, and allowed myself a small, self-deprecating laugh. This was insane, absolutely insane. But somehow it had worked. Micro cliffhangers as I reached for my water. She looked at me, one eye flickering with what I can only describe as amusement, or at least the closest alien approximation, and said, "Next cycle will be more efficient." I froze, realizing that the adventure in some form was far from over. But for now, I survived, I breathed, I reflected. And, somehow, I smiled at the absurdity of it all. The apartment returned to its normal rhythm, the fridge hummed, sunlight warmed the floor, the faint aroma of popcorn lingered. And somewhere in that ordinary chaos, the extraordinary had happened, leaving me changed, nervous, and strangely curious about what would come next. I realized I was no longer just a human male renting an apartment. I was a participant in something far larger, far weirder, and impossibly intimate. I sat back, exhausted, laughing softly at my own survival instincts, and accepted a simple truth: living with an alien roommate who tries human breeding for science is the most terrifying, ridiculous, and enlightening experience a person could ever have. And somehow, despite the awkwardness, the humiliation, and the lingering tension, I couldn't wait to see what came next.